in the program. But first up, let's catch up with Coalition frontbencher Paul Fletcher, who joins us, Minister for Major Projects and Local Government. Thanks for joining us, Paul.
Good to be with you, Chris.
Look, we know the election is close. All the polling tells us it's close. After all the trauma and tragedy of Labor's time in government from 2007 to 2013, how could it possibly be a close election?
Well, I think what Labor's launch showed us today is that we really do need to be reminding ourselves of same old Labor, Rudd, Gillard, Rudd, all the chaos of those years. Because what we saw from Mr Shorten today was he put another $3 billion on the spendometer. He does not have an economic plan. He barely mentioned the economy. He didn't mention border security, border protection at all, probably because he wasn't confident he could mention it without being jeered at by his own candidates in the room. Because when he says Labor's plan on border protection is the same as the Coalition, we all know that's nonsense. But he doesn't have an economic plan, and that's really what came out today. It's just about more spending, whatever they really can come up with to try and attract votes. But there is no plan, and that's the real contrast in this election, and we've seen that underlined today.
Well, this is my point, really. This is my point, that these factors have been so clear for so long. Labor were in government only 3 years ago. Everybody in this country knows what they did to the federal budget. Everyone in the country knows what they did when it came to border security and the tragedy and chaos we saw there. Everybody knows about the carbon tax and Labor's leadership instability and knifings. Yet here you are, just at the end of the first term, and the election is neck and neck. It shows that the Coalition has failed politically.
Well, I'll leave it to others to make an assessment. What I'd say is we've got 2 weeks to go, and we are very focused on continuing to make the case for our plan for jobs and growth, our plan for a transition to a strong new economy. That's why we're talking about policies such as an innovation statement, such as our spending on defence, such as the export opportunities from the free trade agreements, sustainable tax relief for business, in particular for small business, so important when it comes to generating growth.
But we're talking about an election that's basically in the balance with all these problems that we're talking about with Labor. I would put to you that the Coalition has been completely ineffective when it comes to pointing out Labor's failings and the risks of going back to Labor.
Well, I think those risks are absolutely manifest, and we just saw it again today because Mr Shorten wants to put another $3 billion on the spendometer, and he revealed that he doesn't have an economic plan. So what we are doing is just getting on with the job of saying to the Australian people, here is the clear distinction. We're also making the case that we have sustainable spending, guaranteed spending on health, on schools, on hospitals, on roads, and the reason that we're in a position to guarantee that spending is because we do have an economic plan. And I do make the point, despite Mr Shorten's scare campaign, under the Coalition, spending is increasing on schools, on hospitals, but we're doing it within the context
spending by a lower amount. Yeah. But this gets back again to the point I'm trying to push here, and that is that the Coalition, you're talking about your economic plan, you're saying you're just going to get back on with the job about talking about the economic plan. Well, 6 weeks into the campaign, we can see that hasn't shifted the polls. It's neck and neck, Labor within striking distance, and a lot of people are sitting back and saying, well, when is the Coalition actually going to go on the front foot and attack the Labor alternative?
Well, we are taking every opportunity to make the point that what Mr Shorten is doing is continuing to put money on the spendometer. He doesn't have a plan as to how to pay for it. And if you just look at some of the announcements he made today, for example, in the infrastructure space, you know, some of them were simply playing catch-up with the Coalition. So he announced some money for Melbourne Metro. Well, that's something that we've already committed $857 million to under the asset recycling plan. But he also announced $400 million for Western Sydney Rail. Now, the first thing we need to get is a plan. Where is this rail line going to be? That's why there's a joint rail scoping study on the needs of Western Sydney between the Commonwealth and the New South Wales government. There'll be a consultation paper issued within a month or two, and that will lay out a series of potential routes. We need to work out what's the right route first before you can talk about spending money. We need to know what's the right route, how much will it cost, and yet Mr Shorten is here committing another $400 million for a rail line without the planning work having been done. So on a portfolio by portfolio basis, we're making the point about the nature of what we're seeing from Mr Shorten and Labor.
He's getting away with it, though. You might need to make it stronger if that's the case. Let's stick with the infrastructure then, and an area that you've got some professional background in, and that's the NBN.
Yeah.
Now, the NBN, to observers like me, that's a classic example of Labor mismanagement, because it's a massive new government monopoly that was scribbled on the back of a napkin between Stephen Conroy and Kevin Rudd. There was no cost-benefit analysis. It was going to be a disaster. Now, you've had 3 years to knock it into shape. It's been a struggle. People are still complaining about the slowness of the rollout, to the extent that Labor are now campaigning on the NBN again as a positive. They're on the front foot saying, vote for us and we'll go back to a bigger, better, faster, more expensive NBN.
What Labor has announced is completely implausible. What Labor has said is for not $1 more of public money, they can take 2 million fibre to the node premises and turn them into fibre to the premises connections. Now, fibre to the premises costs about twice as much as fibre to the node, and Labor's saying not $1. It's a miracle. Why didn't we think of it? Well, the reason we didn't think of it is because it doesn't work. It's a con. But the key point is this: Labor's performance on NBN in their 6 years in government was chaotic. It was hopeless. By the time they left government, barely 300,000 premises were able to connect around the country. Today, the number is 2.6 million in less than 3 years. It's going up by 30,000 a week. And if we turn from premises able to connect to those actually connected, we are connecting about 60,000 a month. Labor managed to connect a total of just over 50,000 in 6 years. So the performance is chalk and cheese. Malcolm Turnbull, as Communications Minister, delivered an extraordinary turnaround. And anybody who says we want the NBN sooner, there's only one party to vote for, that's the Coalition, because we will get it done by 2020. By late 2018, 3/4 of premises will have it. By 2020, it will be done. And we've got a track record to back that up, because for 8 quarters in a row, NBN Co has met its stated targets. It never once met its targets under Labor.
Now, I'm not going to contest that for the sake of contesting it. I think the story is roughly as you've outlined it, because the original NBN was a disaster and it was uncosted. But it gets back to my central point again, is that you don't seem to be able to prosecute this argument in the political world to the extent that Labor are actually on the front foot over NBN now. This must be a deep worry 2 weeks out from the election campaign.
I don't think anybody seriously believes Labor's claims. When Labor claimed at the start of this week that they could deliver more fibre to the premises and it wasn't going to cost any more, that immediately failed the credibility test. It was like the week before when they claimed they were going to have, when they admitted they were going to have deeper deficits for 4 years in a row, and then they said they were going to get back to balance at the same time as the Coalition. Again, failed the credibility test. So Labor is claiming things which just simply do not stack up. They have admitted themselves under their own plans for NBN it will not get built, even if you believe their timetable, won't be completed till 2022. But if you look at their chaotic record last time, very likely it'll take longer than that, because one of the reasons we've gone for a higher mix of fibre to the node is so you can get the network rolled out more quickly. And that's something Labor appears to have missed the point of when they've suggested changing the mixes they have.
OK, let's talk about Labor's other big focus today, and that was Medicare, a scare campaign over the Coalition privatising Medicare. Is there any kind of Coalition government Medicare privatisation task force in place?
No, absolutely not. The Prime Minister has made this absolutely clear. There will be no change to Medicare. Medicare will stay in government hands.
But up until today, there was a plan to look at possible outsourcing of Medicare payments. Presumably that is the fig leaf on which Labor has been hanging this claim.
It's been a complete beat-up, an absolutely baseless beat-up, a cynical scare campaign by the Labor Party. Why? Because they don't have much else. They really don't have much else to campaign on. So what we saw from Mr Shorten today was him saying, I will defend you against something the Coalition's going to do. Only problem, the Coalition's not going to do it. Malcolm Turnbull has made that clear repeatedly. This is an empty, cynical, baseless scare campaign because they've got nothing else.
Although Malcolm Turnbull did today rule out this outsourcing of Medicare payments. So in effect, he's made a policy call to get rid of the possibility of privatisation or outsourcing of that function. So he's, in a way, he's justified Labor's campaign by shifting that policy ground.
There was no basis at all for Labor's campaign. It was a complete beat-up. But the Prime Minister, as you say, has made it clear that this study in relation to outsourcing of payments is off the table. But that is a very different, I want to make it very clear, that is a totally different thing.
Oh, yeah, I mean,
totally different thing from any suggestion that Medicare should be privatised. But it really does show how bereft the Labor Party is of a plan. But they do not have a plan for Australia's economic future when they are campaigning on a completely empty and baseless scare campaign. That's what all Australians should be worried about as they think about which party to vote for. And they've got to make that choice in 2 weeks. Indeed, at pre-poll, people are already voting. They need to choose the party that has a plan for Australia's future for the transition to a strong new economy, because our economy is transitioning. We need to become more diversified, and that's why we've got such a strong plan with our innovation plan, with thousands of well-paid defence jobs, capitalising on the opportunities of the free trade agreements with China, with Korea, with Japan, our small business tax cuts, because small business is key to jobs, and we believe in small business, we support small business, and Labor, frankly, doesn't understand small business. They don't like small business.
Labor's slogan put out there today, putting people first, it's pretty obvious, but I think pretty well chosen. They do talk about people in every portfolio area, every policy area they talk about. Are they not capitalising on a weakness there that you on the coalition side have also failed to explain exactly, for instance, the company tax cuts, what they will do for workers, for families, what the human dividend of all that is?
The plan that we have, the well-specified plan across many areas of government activity, is designed to stimulate jobs, stimulate growth, and get Australians into jobs, keep Australians in jobs, back Australians, back Australian business. That's what we're about. Now, Labor is about the agenda of, frankly, union officials. I mean, you can, as the Prime Minister made the point today, you can look at what Labor was trying to do with safe rates, so-called safe rates, putting 30,000 self-employed truckies out of work. So, when you scratch what Labor's on about, very often it's giving effect to the agenda of union bosses. And that's really no surprise when you look at where most Labor politicians come from.
All right, I'm going to show you some vision now. You'll be able to see it on that screen from today's Labor launch that you might enjoy. It's Bill Shorten showing the former Labor leaders at the launch today. Bill Shorten introducing Bob Hawke and Julia Gillard and Paul Keating. Here we go. Here we are. Asking it will eventually come. There's Blanche de Pouget, Bob Hawke's wife. There's Bob Hawke. Now Bill Shorten's introducing Paul Keating and Julia Gillard. Of course, Bill Shorten knifed Julia Gillard. Paul Keating knifed Bob Hawke. There's sort of ugly personal recriminations in all of that, Paul Fletcher, which is why I want to ask you, do you believe that Tony Abbott should be at your own coalition party launch next Sunday, and will he be honoured by Malcolm Turnbull?
Look, Tony Abbott is an eminent Australian. He's obviously served our nation extraordinarily well as a senior politician, as Prime Minister, and as he himself has said, continuing to serve the people of Warringah.
He should be at that launch and honoured as the most recent past Prime Minister?
I will leave the mechanics of that to the to the National Campaign Director. Can I say I'm a great admirer of Tony Abbott's. He's given our nation great service. And he continues to give our nation service, and he continues to give the people of Warringah great service. And I think it's really admirable when you see a former Prime Minister out there every day campaigning to hold his seat and helping others in other seats around the country. Tony Abbott's taking nothing for granted about this election outcome. The Coalition is taking nothing for granted. What we're on about is demonstrating to the Australian people that we've got a plan for the future of Australia for a transition to a strong new economy.
So having said all that, he should be honoured at the Coalition campaign launch, shouldn't he?
Look, decisions about the campaign launch are a matter for the the federal director, Tony Nutt, and for the Prime Minister. I will leave it to them, and I will support the decision that they make.
No doubt you will. Thanks very much, Paul Fletcher. Really appreciate your time. Paul Fletcher there, the Minister for Major Projects and Local Government.